Compassion. Now look at this. This is very interesting. I said, wait a minute. Is compassion an experience that we feel in our heart, or is compassion the force that connects the universe? And the abbot said, yes. That is a powerful understanding. That you and I are capable. We can have a feeling in our hearts. It's the feeling that the universe is made of. Compassion is both the force that connects and the feeling that we experience. And that is what makes compassion so very powerful. Now, our idea of compassion in the West is very different from the idea of compassion that we hear from the Tibetans. When we think of compassion, we think, oh, poor person, I need to help them. And that may be a small part. But a lot of compassion is the ability to see the world for what it is rather than our judgments of what we make it. And that is a lifetime of work for all of us. We're all learning that right now. Compassion is this force. So the ancient instructions, how do we do this? The instructions are very precise. In the Buddhist traditions, and what we're finding in Tibet, number one, they're saying that to create the healing, to create the peace, to create the miracles, first, we must feel as if the miracles have already happened without judgment, without ego. And that's hard for the Western mind. So first we must do this, to feel as if our prayers have already been answered without judgment, without ego. Okay, now, we're going to switch gears. We're going to go to a different monastery. This is a monastery in Egypt, in the mountains of Egypt. By the way, I saw Italian mountains for the first time yesterday with beautiful new snow. Did you see them? Beautiful new snow yesterday? Very beautiful, very beautiful. Thank you, Savannah. This is the mountains of Egypt. And this is interesting because when you think of Egypt, you don't think of mountains. You think of desert and ocean, sea. But this is in the mountains of Egypt. There is a very old monastery. This monastery is at the very base of Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai of Exodus, the book of Exodus. This is called St. Catherine's Monastery. Have you been to St. Catherine's Monastery? Some of you have seen it? Okay, then you know what you're going to see here. On the outside, this monastery looks very old. This is a Coptic Christian monastery. The monks are Coptic Christians. They wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning and begin their prayers. They go to sleep when the sun goes down. They have no electricity that they use. The electricity is there, but they don't use it. They burn oil for their light. They bake their bread in the sun. They pump their water from the wells every morning. It looks very primitive on the outside. Wait until you see the inside of this monastery. Would you like to see the inside? Okay, I was very surprised when we saw this. We walked, this is in the middle of the desert, nowhere in the desert. Look at the inside of this monastery. The first time I saw this, in the middle of the desert, I thought, how could they do that? And then I remembered the monastery has been there 1,500 years. They've had 1,500 years to decorate. So it's good. All right, it was in this monastery I know that there is a hidden library in this monastery. Beautiful library. Part of it is open to the public, part of it is hidden. However, before you get to the monastery or to the library, you have to go past these rooms. Every monk who has ever lived in the monastery, their body remains in the monastery, so the energy of the monastery stays in one place. So for 1,500 years, every body of every monk that has died here, when the monk dies, they take the leg bones and put them in one room. They take the skulls and put that in another room. They take the rib cage and put it in another room. And they label them all so they can tell us where Brother John from 1604, where his skull is. They keep everything. They keep everything in this monastery, including the records of the ancient wisdom. So we ask the question, is there a secret library? And at first they said no, because they did not want us to see these rooms. The only way to get to the library is to walk past these rooms. We convinced them that we would like to see this library. They took us past these rooms, and we ended up in a room that looks like this. Now, can you see this door right here, the arch? Do you see the archway? And do you see this little window right here? There's a little window that's covered with brown paper. And this abbot right here, here's the abbot of the monastery. He's the man in the very back. I apologize, you can't see my pointer, but he's the man in the very center. I asked this abbot, can we look inside that room? And he said, no, it's not possible. And I said, please? And he said, we cannot. And I said, we've come a long way just to see this place. He said, okay. But he said, no photograph. No photograph. So I do not have a photograph. I want to tell you what's in this room. Now, this is an old monastery. They bake their bread in the sun. They use oil for the lamps. They have no electricity that they use. And we walked into that room, and all of a sudden, there is a room full of computers. Apple computer, Macintosh computer, IBM computer, scanners, satellite boxes. And I said, what are you doing in this room? And the monk became very serious. He said, we have been in this monastery 1,500 years. And we've been very fortunate because we have never been overrun by a foreign army. We've never been taken over. He said, but we think that this monastery will be destroyed in our lifetime. We think something will happen, that there will be a war in this part of the world, and this monastery will be destroyed. And he said, before that happens, we will scan every page of every one of our ancient texts onto the World Wide Web to preserve for future generations. And this is what they're doing, is they're recording all of the texts that are found in this library for future generations, putting it up onto the World Wide Web. So the question, what is in these texts that's so valuable? What is in these old texts that makes them so powerful? Well, some of the things that are in these texts are icons, pictures of Jesus. This icon was created within 300 years of the death of Jesus from the descriptions of people who lived with him and saw him. This may be one of the closest representations to Jesus that we actually have today. There are old, beautiful, illuminated manuscripts like this. Beautiful books, Coptic, Christian texts. Early Christian Bibles, only 100 or 200, 300 years after the time of Jesus. And this is why I brought you to this monastery. I want to share with you one of these texts. One of the texts that was edited from our Christian Bible is in this monastery. And we saw it, and you'll see a picture of it here. How many have heard of the lost Gospel of Thomas? The lost Gospel of Thomas. Some of you have heard of that text. Very, very powerful text. The lost Gospel of Thomas is powerful because it is believed to be the actual words of Jesus as he was teaching those around him how to use the power of human emotion in his life. Now, I'm going to share two of these images with you. We said earlier, to unleash the force of the divine matrix in our lives, first, we have to understand how it works. And the science tells us how it works. Secondly, we must speak the language that the divine matrix recognizes, and science cannot tell us that. That comes from our past, from our culture, from our history, from those who have learned and used this language for thousands of years. So this is what we're doing right now. We're learning what did Jesus and what did the great masters say about this language. Because it's the same whether you're talking Buddhist or Hindu or Christian, pre-Christian traditions. They're all telling us that there is a field of energy and that we have the language to use that field. This is an actual page out of the Gospel of Thomas. So we know that this ancient gospel actually existed. And you can see some of the letters. These are Greek letters. You can actually read some of, if you know Greek, you can see some of the Greek letters right here. In the Gospel of Thomas, two very important keys. This was written right around 300 years after the time of Jesus. In this gospel, okay, so here's what we're doing. We've been in the Buddhist monasteries in Tibet, and they're telling us that that feeling is the prayer, one. Two, that we must feel as if our prayers have already been answered. Okay, and now we're in an Egyptian monastery with the texts that used to be our tradition before they were edited, and we're going to look at the instructions that tell us how to do that. Okay if we do that? Is that good? Okay. Gospel of Thomas. If you have a copy of the Gospel of Thomas, this is verse 106, translated from the Nag Hammadi Library. And if you do not have a copy, it's in our books, and you can go to any library and pick this up. Verse 106. Look at what the Lost Gospel of Thomas says. It says, when you make the two, thought and emotion, one. So the Gospel of Thomas is talking about thought and emotion. It's saying when you make your thought and your emotion one, look at what happens. You will say to the mountain, mountain, move away, and the mountain will move away. It's saying that when you can marry your thought and your emotion into one single potent force, that is when you have the power to speak to the world. The tumor that disappeared in the woman this morning, that is an example. When those practitioners had the thought of the woman being healed and the feeling and the emotions were all one, the mountain moved, the tumor disappeared. Okay, so this is one place. Now, secondly, when you make the two one, what are they talking about? What are the two? Let's go back to our image. The two, thought and emotion. When the two become one in our hearts, we create the feelings in our bodies. When thought and emotion become one, and you'll see how to do that in just a minute.